Brahma Gurur Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. I bow to my Guru as Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva, as all things, all deities. Guru is Brahma, Guru is Brahman. And I bow to him in you, because it is to that Divine One that I seek in lecturing to appeal. You are that. I seek to appeal to that one in you, to remind you of who you really are. You are not a man or a woman or an Indian or American or whatever. You're not rich or poor. You don't have bad habits. You are the ever-perfect, eternal being. All you need to do is wake up to who you really are. You don't have to attain anything. There's no struggle to reach up to something that you are not. You are that. The only mistake comes in thinking that I, this imperfect being, am perfect. And I've met a lot of people, self-styled Vedantins, who think that they're perfect when in fact they're not at all perfect. It is the inner self that is perfect, and that self would never boast, I am perfect, because it already is. He who knows, he knows, naught else knows. My Guru was very sweet and loving, as I have often said. But I want people to know that there was another side to him. I went one time to a meeting where one of his disciples, or I should say a disciple of disciples, was telling stories about him, and I got a little irritated. I didn't say anything, but I just left the scene. She was depicting him as so cutesy. He was powerful. And I'd like to read a little story in which he displayed some of that power one time, because he could not be bought by anything. Bernard told me the story. The master, he said, was once invited to a dinner at a wealthy home in New York City. Everyone there belonged to the so-called upper crust social set. They asked him afterwards to give a speech. He politely declined. They insisted, however. At last he said, "You won't like what I have to say." I imagine they couldn't believe that he would say very much, at most a few platitudes. Their own lives, after all, were superficial. They couldn't imagine the master's perception being very deep. After they'd kept on insisting, the master finally arose to address them. He spoke at length about the shallowness of their lives and the emptiness of their ambitions. Many of those in the room were reduced to tears. His hosts weren't happy, of course, but he himself had not had any other choice but to speak as he felt. His commitment was to the truth. Many people were changed that evening, I suspect, by thoughts that he had awakened in them. He was never untruthful. If he had to say something unpleasant, he would have to say it. But he didn't like to say it. There was a time when he was invited to a group who were very proud of eating raw foods. They called them unfired foods. And he said, "I never ate a worse meal in my life." He told me the story. And then they wanted him to speak afterwards, and he said, "I'd rather not." "Oh, no, you must, you must." He said, "You won't like what I have to say." "Oh, no, please, you have to speak." Well, he started out by saying, "In the first place, this is the worst food I have ever tasted in my life. Secondly, it is entirely unscientific." And they were all in outrage and uproar, and "Oh, it's very fine food, it's very scientific," and so on. He said, "It's completely unscientific, but because you're not listening to me, and if you don't listen to me, within 15 days, one of you will die of malnutrition, and this place will be closed down by the authorities." Oh, they were furious. Well, it happened. 15 days later, somebody died of malnutrition, and the place was closed down. But he could be powerful. when he wanted to be, when he felt he had to be. He could not be untruthful. And there were times, too, when he helped his disciples, especially. I remember he said that when you are liberated, then 7 generations forward and backward are automatically freed also. I asked Sri Rama Yogi this because I never had a chance to ask my guru. But Rama Yogi said, well, it's not that they're all liberated, it's that when one person is made the emperor, his whole family receives a very high position. And that is the glory of the crop, as Master put it. It's the wonder of achieving that they do receive an enormous impetus in their spiritual progress. Now, first, a doubt on my part that he was liberated many lifetimes ago. So does it count this in this life? I don't know the answer. Dr. Lewis said to him, well, what about the disciples? And that Master answered, oh, they come first. So I hope that's the case, at least in this lifetime. But again, since he was liberated long ago, these are mysteries. Perhaps I shouldn't even bring them to your attention. But I want you to know that this spiritual path that we're talking about is just not sitting at home and chanting Om and being devotional toward God. It's many, many things more. And the hidden mysteries are extraordinary. Well, anyway, in this case that I was thinking about, the mother of a disciple, but she was also very devoted to the Master, she was suffering from breast cancer and died from it. And Master discovered that she had died in a hospital that pretended to cure cancer. But he discovered that all they did was give you water and wait for you to die. And Master was so outraged at this, he said, Divine Mother, destroy that place. And within a month, the police moved in. Everybody, all the authorities were taken off to prison. And Master said that I prayed to find this woman again, and he saw her in the astral world. She was being led away by an angel, and she was looking at the flowers in the astral world, which is for highly advanced souls or developed souls, even slightly developed. The astral world is much, much more beautiful than this one. Don't look for that because there's much more ahead, but it's a great respite anyway. And he called to her, and at first she didn't recognize him. She'd gone through that period of forgetfulness, and then he touched her on the shoulder, on the chest, and she remembered him. She said, "Oh, I'll never forget you again." And then she showed him the cancer was all gone. And so the masters and their lives, there are all kinds of fascinating mysteries. Some of them are inexplicable. Some of them are inspiring. Some of them just make you think, why bother to try to understand things? Just try to know God. There was one time he was sitting in his room, and all of a sudden, people on the same floor with him heard this loud clanking noise. And they asked him the next morning, well, what on earth was that? Well, it turned out that when he had been a general in Spain in a moderately recent life, that means just a few hundred years ago, he had been born there to drive out the Moors and to help Christendom to maintain its integrity. And he worked sort of on a grassroots level, but this soldier who had been under him at that time had materialized himself to the Master in his bedroom, and that was what all that clanking was, because he was still wearing armor. And he asked for Master to free him, and Master did. Free him from what? From being body-bound? I don't quite know. But these experiences, I have to say that they were moderately common. Living with a Master is an extraordinary thing, and I tell you, if you really want to find interest in life, forget the movies. Find yourself a guru. There are some marvelous things that go on, but the most marvelous thing of all is that you will see yourself growing, such that in a very short time you realize you're just not the same person.